Hey, so I came across the reports, and unfortunately, I couldn't listen to the full audio. It was on the BBC iPlayer service, which I don't have. So I believe it was iPlayer, but it was one of those formats where you listen to the audio and you need to sign in and so on. But I think just the subject in general is worth talking about. So the headline was, "I'm disabled, and I use sex workers, and I'm proud of it." Um, and it was basically a gay disabled man talking about how he uses sex workers to presumably deal with his need for sex. So this is something I've touched on before, but I think it's one of the last great taboos of Western society, which is sex, or the situation of people who are involuntary celibate. And I think it's very important that the issues around this are understood. Let me just first make a disclaimer because it's important that people know that I'm not coming from a point of being in this situation right now. So, no, I'm not a virgin. I did lose my virginity late, which is why I um, have a lot of perspectives on this, but I'm not a virgin. I had my first sexual experience late, but it was fantastic. It was a very beautiful thing. And obviously, I'm not going to go into details here. That's because I'm a gentleman. It wouldn't be fair to the lady in question. But the point is, I'm not a virgin. And yes, I've had more than one sexual experience. Um, but not as many as some people. That's true. However, I know what it was like for years to be the sort of isolation and loneliness and mental anguish and a whole range of other negative emotions that came with that was at times agonizing and almost physically agonizing because when you feel so isolated, when you want something so much, it can actually produce physical health problems such as anxiety, such as the sort of issues that come about from loss of sleep and so on. One thing that has always made me very angry is these disgusting people that think they have a right to bully others who are in this situation. I mean, there's particularly this laddish thing whereby you'll get a group of male friends, heterosexual male friends, and they think it's fun to throw, to constantly jibe the virgin in the group, um, or the supposed virgin. You know, a lot of it may well be bravado, especially with young men, teenagers, especially, whereby most of them might well be virgins, but no one wants to admit that. So it's just the thing to jibe their mate. Now, the way I see banter is that yes, young men have a laugh with each other, but when it's always directed at one individual, that can become something very toxic. If it's evenly shared out, like if the banter's directed in everyone's direction, that's one thing. But when it's always directed at one individual, it's sheer bullying, and that person might delude themselves that that's their friends, or they might delude themselves, oh, it's just a bit of harmless fun. But if someone really is going through extreme, if they're feeling incredibly lonely, then that just makes it worse. And I've been there. I know what it's like. And this is a serious problem because when it's not addressed, when it becomes a taboo, then some men, a minority of men, will take more extreme measures. And an example of this is what happened in Toronto 2 years ago, the van attack, which I believe was the first of its kind. And that was shocking. 10 people killed. And that was a misogynistic extreme act. I mean, the guy in question apparently done it. Well, I say the first of its kind. Actually, Adam Lanza, I believe the guy's name was, who committed a mass shooting in Florida a few years before that, also cited being rejected by girls as one of his reasons for doing it. Now, these guys don't deserve any sympathy. They're extremists. But one thing that was notable after the Toronto attack is people automatically lumped every man who's in that position in the same category, like they're all bitter losers who hate women or who blame their problems on women. There's a few things to say about that. Firstly, women also go through this. Disabled women, women who, for other reasons, may find themselves socially polarized. So it's not exclusive to men. Women also go through loneliness. The way I see it, the need for consensual sexual experience is absolutely human, probably the most human thing there is. So I don't know why people stigmatize it. I don't know why people look down on people for wanting sex. It's the most basic human desire. And it tends to be either people who have a normal or a lot of experience, who seem to think that they're better, or religious people who bring all the religious dogma into it. And both are wrong. Religious people, it's fine to say I'm saving sex for marriage. That's fine. I respect that, but they can't impose that dogma on other people. That's one school of thought. Then the other is those who, like I say, they've had a normal experience, whatever that is, i.e., they've had experience, and they think that if someone's in their late 20s or 30s or the 40s and they haven't had sexual experience and there's some sort of freak, oh, there must be something wrong with them. It really makes me angry because it's a particularly repulsive sort of bullying. It's just it's very obnoxious, and it works both ways. I mentioned like guys in this whole banter thing, this whole laddish culture of running down their so-called mates, but you probably get equivalents in female circles, like the popular girl in a high school. The group of girls, and the bullying in girls' schools is possibly even worse than in boys' schools. You get the group of girls who gossip all the time about the unpopular girl or the girl who's a little bit different. And I mean, I hate bullying in all its forms, but there's something particularly nasty about that sort of bullying, attacking someone for their sexual orientation or their lack of sexual experience. It's disgusting because that person is already going through a lot of anxiety, loneliness. Um, it's different if they've got religious convictions because that's something they've put on themselves. That's kind of their own like red line. Okay, I'm going to wait until marriage. But look, the fact of the matter is, not everyone can just has the confidence to just move in and make small talk with people, or just because one person could do something, everyone's different. Doesn't mean that someone else um, has that has the opportunities, has the self confidence, whatever you want to call it. And some people actually do have the self confidence; they just don't have the opportunities. So I do believe that there is an argument to be made for a mutual contract between consenting sex workers and people who really have no other outlet for finding sexual experience, and it's sad. But the fact of the matter is, this is not an ideal world. People will say, oh, but they'll judge it and they'll look down on it, but it's not an ideal world. So if you've had a normal sexual experience, you met your girlfriend or your boyfriend, um, and you just dated for a while and you had sex and it was all great, you know, you have no right to judge people in this position, provided it is consensual. I mean, I saw an acquaintance of mine say some men think they have a right to sex. Of course they don't. No one has a right to sex in terms of demanding it from someone. But that's a very different thing than wanting sex. I mean, how dare anyone judge those who want sex? It's the most human desire. I mean, maybe it's become normalized for you because you have sex with your wife or husband every night, but I don't know why people have this pompous, self righteous attitude of, oh, that person wants sex, they must be some sort of pervert. It's completely, it's nonsense. But I really think this thing about involuntary celibacy is one of the last great taboos in Western society. Um, I don't really know how it compares in other societies. Certainly in ultra conservative Islamic states, it's incredibly taboo. But In Western societies where we do see sex everywhere, we see it in films, we see it in advertising, and I'm not purist. I'm okay with that, broadly speaking. But although I would argue it is overdone in the music industry, where it's purely used to sell videos. But that's the point. It is everywhere, and if you are if you are a young man or a young woman, or of any age for that matter, and you're not getting sexual experience, the mental health effects of that can be immense. Like I say, for me, I lost my virginity late, and the years before that, I wasn't some sort of sex maniac, but I wanted the experience. And there were times that I was absolutely miserable. It caused profound loneliness, mental anguish, because I thought, well, why am I? I treat women well. I I don't have this entitled mentality. Why was that the case? So I think there needs to be more honesty about this in terms of how people are treated. And I think where this is one argument for a regulated, safe sex industry. I think the problem is if you just ban prostitution or you prosecute clients, prosecuting clients is misguided because those who do it say, oh, well, they're the ones in power. Really? Well, what if a sex worker is, especially at the higher end of things, they're charging very large amounts of money. They're getting the money. It's a mutual contract. No one ever talks about that side of it. You know, People just look at it from a point of, oh, they're the person getting sex, so they have the power. But, a sex worker who's getting a substantial amount of money on the upper end of things, of course, they, I would argue, are in a position of power. No one ever talks about that, especially feminists. They look at it from a point of view, oh, it's a poor, downtrodden woman and the powerful, sleazy man. I think that's a caricature of the sex industry that is, I mean, that is a caricature, isn't it? The sleazy businessman or the sleazy politician undercover who's, you know, exploiting the poor, vulnerable girl. That tends to be a stereotype of the sex industry and of clients in particular. I don't think it's that simple. And I think those who have this smug self righteousness need to answer that question. How do people who just don't get the opportunities, it could be from a disability, it could be from something else, what is their answer? How do they get the experience? Because you can judge, you can look down on them, but they have the same fundamental right to happiness as you do. So these are things that really need to be considered.